Everyone, welcome to another exciting edition of Words, Images, and Worlds. On this episode, delighted to be talking with author Glenn Rolfe. Glenn, thank you for joining.
Thanks for having me, man.
Absolutely. On this episode, we're talking about a book, The Siren of Groves Peak, which is an entry in the horror genre, but certainly not your first. So, glad to be talking about your work in this world.
Cool.
Yeah. What led you initially to the written word?
I've always been. I started off songwriting, uh, and I've started trying to write songs when I was like 12 or something. Back when I was listening to hair metal all the time, so they were probably really good. If I could find those original songs, they were probably really, really, really good. Um, but no, I played in some bands for my teenage years, and then I started reading books because my bass player gave me a Stephen King book and said, "I think you might like this." I'm like, "I don't read books. Get that out of here."
Hmm.
And it was The Dark Half, and I read it, and I
Oh
was
yeah.
like, "Oh man, that was awesome." This is. I didn't think it would keep my attention, but it totally did. And then I started reading more King books and Anne Rice books, and it was funny because back then, like in the late '90s, early 2000s, I got an idea for like a vampire book that I wanted to write, like our story in my head, and I kind of just came up with some character names, a couple of little ideas, and then left it alone. Fast forward like another 10 years, I'm out of bands. I've got a couple of kids, so I don't have time to play in bands. I need something I can do by myself. I don't need to coordinate a bunch of people. And I had written a few short stories over that decade or so, and I started typing one up one night just for kicks, and I really liked it, and I was editing it while I was putting it up, because I'd read a lot more in that decade, and that became my first book, which was Blood and Rain, my werewolf book.
Hmm.
Eventually, it became that book. It took me about 4 months to write the original first draft of that book, and it was I started writing because I needed something I could do by myself. I'm a creative person. I need to get this stuff that's inside of me out, and that was it kind of happened by accident. I started posting things on Facebook to my horror book friends, and they were like, I shared a chapter of that first story, and they were like, "Oh, what happens next?" I was like, "Oh, I don't know. Well, give me a night or two, and I'll let you know." And then that's how it started. Like 6 chapters in, 7 chapters in, something like that. I was like, "Listen, I've got something going on here. I need to stop putting these up one by one and just start writing this." And they were like, "Yes, go do it." So
Hmm. Hmm.
that's how I got from rock and roll, playing songwriting into the horror world. So
Love it. Love it. What was the inspiration for this particular book, The Sirens of Groves Peak?
I don't really know. I had told Flame Tree, who's put out three of my books at that point, that I thought I was going to try go in a different direction, not horror wise, just try another publisher. Um, my time with them I came in during COVID. My first book came out Until Summer Comes Around, came out in 2020 during COVID,
Mm.
and surprisingly, it did well for me. But then the next two, COVID was still going on the next year, so I couldn't do any book signings or anything like that that I wanted to do. And then by the third book, it seemed like something was not happening. I don't know if it was me personally not promoting as much as I used to, or the company was kind of in a weird flux, like changing how they were doing things, which I think was a little bit of it. And I thought, you know what, we should probably just end this partnership, and I'll go my way and you guys keep doing what you're doing. But then working with Don Doria, who's the acquisition editor at Flame Tree, and he did all the leisure horror books that I loved, that really got me writing. Um, I was like, I love working with Don so much. It was nothing to do with Don. I love Don. If I could only write books for Don, that'd be fine with me. I just wish they would, do a little more, make a little more noise. But I got this, I started thinking about the Siren story because one of my favorite books, which I have right here, Leisure Books. Don signed this one, of course, for John
Mhm.
Everson. Siren. This was one of my favorite books. And I think what happens to me a lot is I'll start reading a book and it will inspire me to do kind of like my own thing. Now, my book's not
Mm-hmm.
really anything like this. We both have a siren in it. That's it's John Everson, so he's got some erotic stuff going on in there. Mine does a little bit in a few scenes, but not quite to the level that John goes. But I think I started this last couple of years. I wanted to restart rereading books that I loved, the books that got my juices flowing originally. And I think I had picked that book to start rereading in this weird space that I was in. And I thought, well, what if I would like to, that'd be cool to write a siren book. I haven't done that yet. Um, and I thought, well, what would my story be about? And I thought, well, I'm right on the coast here in Maine. It's got to be a Maine coastal town. I love visiting coastal towns. I said, lobstering. Yeah, lobstering's huge. And, kind of just like these little ideas just started adding up. And then I'm like, well, how's this going to work? And that's kind of like with Dawn. And since I started working with Flame Tree, I started writing outlines. I didn't outline ever before that. It's like my first, I don't know, whatever, however many books and novellas I've written, I never used outlines. It wasn't until I started working with Don again, because I worked with him at Sam Hain as well. But when I started with Flame Tree, I said, I'm going to try writing outlines to see how it is. And I love it. I love it. And it's like I get to take those ideas and then go, well, then what happens when this happens? And how does that affect these characters and what would they do next? And just kind of do that with my outline. And that's kind of how this story, like I said, started to spark the idea with like, as soon as I started reading, I'm maybe 2 chapters in John's book, which I've read before. I hadn't read it in maybe a decade by this time. Just like, oh, what would mine be like? And that's kind of like, I started pulling these little pieces and slowly it builds into this outline. And I've got a whole story. I can write an outline usually once I get going fairly quickly. And it feels like it's amazing because when you finish a full outline, maybe 8, 9, 10 pages at the most, it feels like you've written a whole book because you've
Mm-hmm.
got basically the whole story right there. I mean, the thing I love that I try to tell people that are scared of outlining is you still come up with new things. It's still new branches that grow from your original outline, but you just know where it needs to end. So you kind of like it gives you can venture off a little bit and bring it back in, and that's really
Mm-hmm.
try to figure that stuff out too. But yeah, this one just started rolling, and it was a lot of fun. And I'm always shocked when I finish a book or an outline. Like, how did I just do that? Like it's crazy. Like the way your brain once it starts, if you get the ball rolling, it's awesome. But sometimes it takes a lot to get it going. So
Yeah,
I didn't really
yeah.
have other than reading that, I didn't have any specific things else in my life that sparked the story. It's just like I have another book that I wrote called Chasing Ghosts. It's a novella, and I same thing. I started reading The Woods Are Dark by Richard Lehman. It was the second or third time I'd read it, but I'm first chapter. Like this crazy thing happens with a hand getting thrown in the road, and I'm just like, oh man, I've got to write a cannibal story. I've got to do this. And it just went, and I wrote a book like that. Just sparked an idea in my head. It got me going. That's a cool thing. That's the cool thing about like rereading books that you love already. Like if you haven't read them in a while, it's just like stuff's new to you. You forget little things. I don't
Mm-hmm.
know,
Mm-hmm.
and it can re-inspire you. It's pretty cool.
Yeah, yeah. Uh, with that inspiration, I love the mythological. So sirens being part of this story was a very cool element to me. What was it like to dig into the mythology side of things?
Well, I don't, I don't, obviously I know from afar about sirens, and I knew sirens and mermaids in horror tend to get blended into one thing, something very similar. So at first I was really, I was terrified because I'm like, wow, this is kind of like a mermaid, but it's a siren. But it's because then I looked up the Greek siren, obviously, and it's more of it's got like a bird like human creature,
Mm-hmm.
which is something I didn't know. I just thought sirens were like mermaids. You know what I mean? I'd read Everson's book. I read a few other books. I barely heard about them, where where it all came from originally. But then I did a little digging when I was writing this because I was like, well, maybe I'll find something in there that I haven't seen before. No one's like touched on. I always look for little ideas like that. Try to dig around a little bit, see if there's anything that maybe I haven't seen anywhere else done that's part of the myth. That didn't happen necessarily with this book, but I did get scared. I'm like, oh crap, I'm doing the more modern, like mutated siren, that the mushed mashup of a mermaid and a traditional siren of what an original siren was. But I had to just say, you know what? Fuck it. Some of my favorite books are like Everson's book. There was one by Down into the Sea, Dan Franklin. He's got a mermaid in that book. Lure by Tim McGregor. I read those two books in the last 2 or 3 years as well before I started rereading Everson's book. So I mean, this was it was probably back here somewhere, swimming around in my head. And John's book just like sparked the rest of it. But uh, anything that I try to do that's got a bigger background is something that like I feel like, if I dig into, I don't want to go too far into like the actual myth. Just like, for an example, in this book, uh, lobstering. Like I touch on it. I have these guys, that's what they do for a living, but I don't actually go into them going out and lobstering in the story because I don't know enough to do that. I don't feel comfortable enough. So I just touch on it, just dip my toes in it to keep the reader knowing like, all right, this is kind of what it is. But I don't go too far into that. I mostly stay in the characters and the story of what's going on right now, what the problem is right now. But same with like the mythology stuff. Like like I said, I'll look for little things that maybe I haven't seen before. I did the same thing with my werewolf book, just trying to find little odd things that I'd never heard of before. People that study it probably have definitely heard these things, but like I think of a reader like myself, probably not, outside of what we've already read. But yeah, so I don't know that I really touched on much except for the singing, the lure of the voice that you mesmerize whoever you're after. And I definitely brought that in, obviously, but I added some craziness into there myself too. So I gotta
Making it
have
your
fun
own.
with it. I gotta have fun with it.
Oh, yeah. Let's talk horror genre just in general. What is it about horror that kind of attracts you as a writer? What does it allow you to do?
What's the greatest thing about horror is you can do everything. You know what I mean? That's one of my favorite things about it. Obviously it's not the only thing. The wanting to I'm afraid of tons of stuff. Somebody said that I don't know what I was afraid of the other day. It was at work, I think. I work at a hotel, and somebody said, "That how does that scare you? You're a horror writer." And I'm like, "Everything scares me. That's why I'm a horror writer." You know what I mean? So that for me, it's probably exercising these demons. I remember seeing too many horror movies when I was a kid, and it freaked me out. And I used to sleep beside my mom's bed. I'd take the couch cushions off and line them up next to my mom's bed because if I was in my room, I'm seeing The Exorcist, I'm seeing Freddy Krueger, Jason Voorhees, I'm seeing all these things that I'll watch in the daylight, but then at night I was terrified, and I end up in my mom's room or staying up listening to my tapes until I fell asleep with the light on. But the writing horror has been amazing because I'm a fan of like all movie types. Like I'm not like a guy that's horror is number one for me. I'm kind of like I don't know. I wouldn't be able to tell you what my favorite type of movie is because I like everything. I love comedies, romance, like the rom coms, the action movies. Like one of my favorite movies is actually A Few Good Men. Is one of my favorite movies. Unforgiven by with Clint Eastwood. That's one of my favorite movies. But obviously, then like Texas Chainsaw Massacre, The Thing, Jaws, uh, The Wedding Singer. So I have all this stuff. So that's kind of where I'm getting my storytelling from, probably just as much as the books, is all these movies that I've watched over and over again. Like Pulp
Mhm.
Fiction is another one of my favorite movies. So that's the Tarantino stuff's all in there too. Um, and then when I'm writing books, I mean, the best way you're going to connect with people, you've got to be willing to share your feelings. You know what I mean? Your fears, your wants, desires, weaknesses. Definitely weaknesses plays into. I always have all of my characters are always flawed. You know, um, and a lot of those flaws are mine. I was just talking to somebody online about they're like how much of a writer is in these books because there was something about an extreme horror writer, like someone saying, "Oh, this guy's a creep," or if you're a creep if you write that kind of stuff, because you must be thinking about that. There was someone that actually
Mhm.
thought that way, and you do run into readers like that once in a while. Not the ones that read it all the time, obviously, because they know better. But I kind of feel like if they read my books, obviously I'm not supernatural werewolf, demon, vampire, and I don't have a lust for blood and human sacrifice in real life. But the rest of the stuff is pretty much me, my life, the people around me, people I've seen, things I've witnessed. You know, it's a lot of me, and I think my favorite storytellers, I feel like they're really sharing themselves with you in these books. It's disguised with all this, creatures and serial killers and stuff, but I feel like the best stories are the ones where you can tell this person's done this stuff. They've been through this. Like, which is why the coming of age stories always click with me uh, as well. Like, I love the coming of age stories when in horror, especially. It's really fun. And you always know when you're reading it, this is what these guys did, or girls did, the women did as children. There's bits of their growing up in there. I don't know if that's why I love those the most, but as a writer, that's why I always do that. And with horror, it's great because you can have the romance, you can have the erotic stuff, you can have as much blood and guts as you want, demons, you know, that you can put a pedophile in your book and then you get to kill the crap out of him, or you better kill the
Mhm.
crap out of him, in my opinion.
Yeah, yeah.
But that's why
Um,
it's my favorite, just because you can put anything in there, sci-fi, any of the genres, any of the genre, mystery, thriller, drama, it can all be in horror. You know what I mean? And I don't know if you can get away with you can't put horror into everything else. You know what I mean? So that's why
yeah,
it works. It works for me as a vehicle. It works for me.
yeah, yeah. Lots to explore and express on the page, and yeah, that processing of life that comes through as a writer.
Absolutely. And I didn't start writing till after I had kids already. So I feel like, when you've got that experience too,
Hmm.
that changes things. You have a whole nother that's another huge fear for me, like anything happening to my kids, and you don't just get to I mean, people can pull it off where they don't have kids and they've read enough, they've seen enough, they've been around maybe nephews and nieces, so they can pull from that. But I think when you have the kids yourself, it hits a lot harder because you can scare the crap out of yourself writing about something happening to a child in the story because it's easier to imagine it being your kid.
Yeah, yeah,
Not to take anything away from anyone that doesn't have kids and writes them into their stories, but I mean, I feel like for me personally, writing, I've I've cried in short stories that I've written. Um, just like there was one that's in my collection, Nocturnal Pursuits. There's a story in there called The Guide, and at the end, like the dad ends up being dead and doesn't know it really right off. But then his guide finds him, and he says, by the end of the short story, he wants to go home and see his wife and his son. And
hmm,
the guide says, "I don't think you should do that. You might not really want that." He brings him to the house anyways, eventually. And when I was writing that scene of pretending I was gone and not, and looking in and seeing my son and his mother just like in the window, just like imagining that, I just started bawling like while I was writing the story, like writing that scene. And I don't know that you get that if you don't have that actual connection and feel, and if it's not something that you can grab onto in your real life. I could be wrong.
Yeah.
Some people are really good writers and have really good imaginations, so that's possible. But for me, like I those moments are crazy. Like when that happens, it's awesome, but it's also scary.
Yeah. Yeah. Uh, if I want to find out more about your work, if I want to follow along, are there some places where I might do that?
Uh, I really should have a website, or I've got like a old websites and blogs and Patreon. It's like they've all had various degrees of success. Like, but I part of the whole 2020 thing was I disconnected all this stuff and just like I'm gonna figure out one thing and do that, and I never figured out one thing. So usually Instagram is where I'm
Mhm.
probably the most active. I'm trying to get back into Facebook, which is way different than the first time around when I was building momentum for my writing. Didn't have the algorithm wasn't as quirky as it is now. Everyone saw what you put up as opposed to this
Yeah.
the way it is now. But Facebook, if you just Google Glenn Rolfe, you'll find Glenn Rolfe horror. You'll find probably all of my stuff will pop up. I mean, my Instagram is Rolfe horror. It's like G Rolfe horror. Um, I don't even remember what my Facebook actual address is, but Google Glenn Rolfe and you'll find it'll bring up my books. Simon and Schuster has a page for us Flame Tree for the Flame Tree authors because they distribute our books here. So there's a page on there that's got all my Flame Tree books until summer comes around. August Eyes, When the Night Falls, and this new one, Siren of Grove's Peak.
Fantastic. Fantastic. Well, Glenn, many thanks for the conversation. Did we miss anything that you want to make sure to include before we close out?
Well, I just want to share the two books. I thought I'd do this real quick.
Hmm.
Two of the books I've just finished reading recently that I thought were awesome that I think people should definitely check out. One I don't really need to because it was a USA Today bestseller, I guess. Dollface by Lindy Ryan.
Hmm.
This is a fun story. It didn't go where I wanted it to go, which is something I do as as a writer reader. I'm like things are starting to happen. You're thinking you're going to get a step ahead of the actual author, and this is what's going to happen. And then they go their own way because it's their book and their story. And at first I was mad, and then I was like, no, that was the right thing to do. Good for you, Lindy. And so that one I really liked. I had a fun time trying to figure out what was going on and where it was going on. But it's a scream type PTA scream mashup that's really good. It's really fun. It's a really fun horror story. And then the other one is the one I'm currently reading is The Whistler by Nick Medina. And I have discovered one of my new favorite authors. Like I read Indian Burial Ground, which came out before this one, and I just loved his voice. It does remind me a little bit of my own, which might be why I love it so much. Like just the references. I feel like me and Nick could have grown up like in the same town. You know what I mean? So for
Hmm.
me personally, I really connect with his writing, and this book I'm about halfway through it is amazing. I love it. I love it. And just like I loved Indian Burial Ground, I probably love this one even more so far. But I just wanted to give a shout
Cool,
out
cool.
to Lindy and Nick. Those are two books I read just recently, and I love them.
Well, thank you for shining the spotlight there, and certainly glad to amplify your work. And many thanks for the conversation. Always glad to have you back.
All right, thanks, man. Thanks for having me.